Well, today we continue our focus on reviewing the Osun governorship elections, and we're joined now by Mr. Femi Kayode, former Minister of Aviation and a member of the People's Democratic Party. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thanks.
Earlier in one of our reports, you had said, yes, you had a good campaign. You congratulated the winner. But ever since then, so many other things have been said. I mean, we read different headlines. We've seen that of the DSS. We read, even yesterday, people spoke about the role of security, militarization. Has your views changed ever since that time?
Well, I haven't had the opportunity. I've just got to your studio to read the papers this morning, apart from the headlines that I saw in this program. I really wouldn't know what they've said. But of course, anybody's free to say anything they want to say. For me, I was there, I participated, I supported and campaigned for our candidate, and I was actively involved for almost 14, 15 days prior to the election. And I was there throughout, and we worked extremely hard. And I saw what was on the ground, and I believe that it was an election that was credible. It was a hard-fought election, and there has to be a winner and a loser in every situation. Unfortunately for us, this time round, our side appeared to have lost. And although I'm aware of the fact that there are issues that are now being raised about that, and of course, it's right and proper for anybody that feels that things may not have been done in the right way for them to raise these issues. It's constitutional right. It's Yola Omishori's constitutional right and prerogative to raise issues concerning the election. But from what I am aware of, and from what I saw, and from what I know, I believe that this was an expression of the will of the people, and subject to whatever may come up in court or whatever. I feel that we should get to a point where we can congratulate those that won an election and not feel as if we've lost. I mean, I don't think anybody has lost here. I think that the Nigerian people and the people of Osun State have won because we've had an election where nobody was killed, nobody was injured, nobody was maimed, and I'm not aware of any serious claims of rigging.
Well, you also said at that time that you polled over 290,000 votes in those local governments. And have you heard people say, wow, so how did you do that? Because does that mean that if you had maybe gotten more votes in some other elections, yes, you would have gotten more than that? But people have said, look, is it actually possible to have polled those amounts of votes in those few local governments?
No, you see, people don't seem to get it very clear. Look, yes, there are some local governments that the PDP won, fewer than the APC. However, in all the local government areas that APC won, the PDP got a relatively high figure. So you add all the figures together. It's not a question of just the votes where we won. We won in, I think, about 6 or 7 local government areas. But the fact remains that throughout the whole state, in all the local government areas in the state, we had substantial support. And, the figure that you mentioned, 292,000 or thereabouts, represents almost 42% of the votes cast in the election, which tells you one thing, and that thing is simple and clear, that no party, the APC or anybody else in the Southwest, can lay claim to being the party of the Yoruba people. I mean, the Yoruba people have, at least in Osun State, have spoken clearly that, look, it's more or less split. More or less just 50-50, a little bit under for us, a little bit over for them. And I think that's a very positive thing. So the support is widespread. Where we failed, I am fully aware, because I did a study on it, and a short analysis, which me and my people did after the election. And I have a clear picture about where we didn't do so well. And I think places like Ede, places like Ilesha, and particularly Osogbo itself, where the person that won got almost 40,000 votes. I think I'm right in saying that. Now, you can tell he got 40,000 votes in Osogbo alone, and that represents almost 50% or almost 50% of what he beat us by, which tells you one thing, that this was actually a very close election. It was a good election. There may have been irregularities here that we have made claims as well. For example, in Ede, some of our returning officers were not allowed to stay there, according to what they told us when they came back to party headquarters, and that will be looked into. But for me, by and large...
Did they say who didn't allow them?
They may claim that the INEC officials did not allow them to do their job as returning officers. They laid claim to the fact that they were asked for letters, representation letters and things like that. And when they didn't produce the letters from the parties, they were not allowed to remain at the polling units. Now, that's a claim, that's an allegation. It needs to be substantiated. It needs to, and you know, I wasn't there, but of course, these are our party people that have said this, and I take that very, very seriously. But having said that, for me, by and large, this was a good election. It was a credible election. There has to be a winner. There has to be a loser. I'm glad at the fact that it wasn't just me that congratulated Ogbeni Aregbesola. The president did the same thing. The party chairman did the same thing. A number of others did the same thing. PDP ministers like Musili Obanikoro, my good friend, did the same thing. And I think that's the way to go in such matters. However, having said that, I should add, if there are issues that the state PDP have seen that none of us have seen or are aware of, which, you know, compels them or makes them feel that they need to go to court on the issue, it's their right and their prerogative. If Aregbesola hadn't gone to court over the 2007 election and remained in court for 3.5 years, he wouldn't have been governor today. So I wouldn't want to say for 1 minute that Omisore or anybody else of the party leadership in Osun State does not have the right to go to court.
I was going to ask you about the INEC officials requesting for those documents from your party officials. That was INEC doing their job, right?
Well, I'm not sure whether part of INEC's job is to ask for a letter of representation from a polling agent. I'm not sure. According to our people, that is not a requirement, and that was where there was a dispute. But then, you know, these things have to be looked into. The veracity of these claims are subject to a lot of investigation, and I would not be the one to tell you whether they were right or wrong. All I know is that coming from our party leaders and our party polling agents, I personally take them very seriously, and I think they ought to be looked into.
Okay. The other issue that a lot of people have talked about was the presence of security personnel.
Agents, yes.
They said the Osun State was militarized. Is that what it should be?
Well, I have a fundamental disagreement with those that have that view. Of course, they're entitled to their opinion, but I look at it from a completely different perspective. For me, I really don't see a problem in the situation whereby you feel that there may be trouble in an election, that the government would now flood the place with security officials. I think it's important to create an atmosphere for people to be able to come out and vote freely without any fear of intimidation or violence from the other side. But the background to this very peculiar type of exercise, because it is peculiar, is the fact that in previous elections in our country over the years, you've had massive violence, killings, abductions, burning of houses and so on and so forth. And the overwhelming majority of people that voters refuse to come out to vote simply because they feel that, look, if we do so, we may end up being killed, or we may end up being brutalized at the polling booth, or so on and so forth. Well, I think the reason why the government took this position was that, listen, everybody, whether you're young or old, a woman or a man, has the right to go and vote freely and fairly without any form of intimidation. And the security agents were there to ensure that. That is my understanding of it. And I might add that this was done in other states before. This was not just done in Osun State. It was done in Ekiti State. Previous to that, I'm told that it was done in Edo State. Previous to that, it was done in Anambra. And previous to that, it was done in other places where PDP lost.
So in these other places you mentioned, were there incidents of, as some people claim from Osun, that there were incidents of sporadic shooting in the air and then arrest of opposition party officials? Were there incidents like that?
Well, I am not sure. You probably have to put that question to the security agents themselves, whether they felt the need to arrest anybody. And when they do arrest people, I'm sure that they must have their reasons for doing so. That question is best put to them. What I would tell you is this, that, you know, being on the other side, that is the PDP, I can assure you, I can tell you clearly that many of our supporters and followers in the state were living in trepidation and fear of reprisals for supporting Iyola Omisore. A lot of them were very nervous about coming out to vote because, going by history and going by the kind of propaganda that was being churned out by the APC at the state level, they felt intimidated, and they felt very comfortable at the fact that the security agents were there. Plus the fact that, if you remember, the whole of the national leadership of the APC was asked to come to Osogbo. Their whole national executive camped in Osogbo. A lot of people came in from Lagos State. The allegation, and again, I wasn't there to verify this, but the very serious allegation was that many, many people were being drafted in thugs and so on and so forth from Lagos State particularly. Money was being carted across state borders and so on. These are the allegations that were being made. And my understanding is the security agents were there to ensure that if this was going on, such people, this this army that was drafted in, allegedly so, was not allowed to inflict any violence on our people, and also to keep the various factions, if you like, apart. And I think that's important. Now, if you allege that this was done for some sinister motive, then surely they could have done a lot better to ensure that the PDP won. This was not the case. What happened was that they created an atmosphere where a free and fair election could be fought, and where the people could express their will without any kind of interference from people on the other side, as it were. So I think the police, the security agencies, you know, if anything, all of us felt a little bit uncomfortable with seeing such things around, but it was for the good and not for the... As regards arrests and so on and so forth, those that were arrested, you need to ask the security agencies why they arrested them. But I am firmly of the view that the security agencies were doing their job simply because they needed to ensure that nobody, particularly those from outside the state, did not come in to come and create mischief. You know, some would argue that people like Obanikoro was in Osun State campaigning. Well, he was there, so was the president, so was the VP, and so many other people within our party. But they were there, but they left prior to the election, a couple of days before. They left Osun State. On the other side, their national executive members, their key figures, their godfathers, the owners of their party remained throughout the election. And a lot of their party supporters were also in the state. So I think that's what the security agencies were trying to do, to ensure a free and fair election and level playing field.
So there was a press conference you participated in before the elections themselves, and you talked about one of the allegations that was raised there. But you do know that sometimes when this allegations, as it were, comes from officials of government, it moves beyond the realm of allegations to facts sometimes. So when the Minister of State for Defense says that, you know, they have information that, you know, people, thugs and what have you, are being moved to Osun State, people think that that should be a fact because he is Minister of State for Defense and should have that type of information at his disposal. Do you think that that also could have, you know, made the opposition party think that this might not be fair in terms of the deployment of security agencies?
I don't, because like you quite rightly said, for a Minister of the Federal Republic to make that kind of assertion, and I was at that press conference, I participated in it, and I worked very, very closely with Obanikoro during the election, plus a number of Jalili Adeshio, Minister of Police Affairs, and a number of other key party leaders in the states, in the Southwest. And, you know, for him to say that, and he said it, he meant what he was saying. And of course, I believe him. I believe him. I am privy to some of the security reports that he was citing. And like I said, many of us on the other side, that is the PDP, felt a little bit intimidated at the fact that such a thing was going on. There was clear evidence of the fact that people were coming in from outside the state in large numbers. Many, many lorries were turned back. Many, many people were intercepted. We had to literally, or rather the government had to literally seal off the state to sort of protect us and preserve us so that the integrity of the process could be ensured. And there was also the other allegation that many people from outside were actually given voters' cards and so on and so forth. And they had to work against that. Now, it's because they did all these things that I, as a PDP leader, can sit in front of you and say, look, we lost the election, but the atmosphere that was created for that election was a good one, and it was a free and fair election, which we lost. And, you know, we're happy to have such elections. Whether you win or whether you lose, it's not a winner-takes-all affair. We had a credible election, and people were allowed to go out and vote. Now, the APC could well argue that, well, if the police hadn't been there, they could have vote, you know, they could have got larger numbers. I doubt that very, very much. I doubt that very much. And, you know, voters on both sides were a little bit intimidated by the security presence, not just their own voters or those that supported them, ours as well, but it was the right and proper thing to do. Like the president said recently, or the other day, people were killed in Bauchi in the 2011 election, 10 youth corpers. People were killed all over the north after the elections were conducted in 2011. People were castrated in places like Akwa Ibom, a terrible thing.
We also do know...
These are the things that we were guarding, or the government was guarding against.
We do know that oftentimes when it comes to general elections, security agencies oftentimes deploy resources to places where they would have been, or where there could be likelihood of violence in elections. So sometimes you find that you have a high-risk states when it comes to election period. Would you have considered Osun? to be high risk?
I am from Osun. I'm from Ile-Ife. Even after the election was fought and won, conducted, after everybody went home, as it were, people were being attacked. In my local government areas, the 4 local government areas, the IFES, our supporters, PDP supporters, were being attacked by APC members. We didn't make a song and dance of it. We appealed to everybody to calm down. The election is over. We should try our best to try and move forward. There's no point in looking back and finger pointing. I mean, the alternative, you asked whether there was a security risk, and whether, of course there is, particularly in the Southwest. The volatility of the area when it comes to politics is very real. And I'm happy at the fact that this is the first or second election, probably in our history, in the Southwest, that you haven't had a case of ballot box snatching, as far as I'm aware. You haven't had a case of murder or killing or maiming during the course of the election or just before the election. You haven't had a case of open, people being harassed and so on and so forth by supporters of other parties. It's never happened before. It happened in Ekiti, it's happened in Osun. I think that's the way forward. We need to ensure that happens.
Do you think that there could ever be a case of over-militarization? Would you consider any circumstance to be over-militarized?
Sure. I understand the concerns, but you have to balance it. You must have a certain level of what you call militarization. I will call it security, to ensure security for the people. You must have that, but at the same time, you must not allow it to slip over or spill over into a situation whereby people are being intimidated or feel that the security agencies are after them. I'm aware of some allegations that some of the leaders of the opposition have made, and of course, any situation whereby a security operative goes overboard and intimidates or threatens people or does things he shouldn't, that is something that is deplorable. But for me, I think by and large, this was a good election. We should encourage our security services to continue to work hard to ensure that they create an atmosphere whereby we can have free and fair elections.
Because you've made 2 assertions now. The first was that your supporters felt reassured because they had been threats that if they did not, support your candidate, there could have been trouble for them. But you also did say that some of them too also felt intimidated by the number of security men deployed.
You can imagine, for example, in Ile-Ife, some of the young people or elderly people, some 65, 70-year-old person steps out and sees soldiers and sees, people from the security intelligence, DSS, and sees policemen all over the place. Naturally, it causes some level of concern. However, it's better to see such people there, ensuring that they are protected, rather than to step out to see, machete-wielding thugs, thirsty for blood and threatening the lives of PDP or APC voters, that if you don't vote my way, I'm going to hack your ears off. I mean, I prefer to have soldiers, security agents, and SSS people on the ground to ensure that we don't end up killing one another and we don't end up fighting in the polling booth. And, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. It worked. Nobody was killed. No macheting. No ballot box snatching. No very serious allegations of rigging, as far as I am aware, so far. And so on and so forth.
What were the issues?
That we should.
What would you say were the issues for your party during these elections? Because
the issues, yeah?
Yes, because a lot of people would say that it was overshadowed. Whatever the issues should have been in terms of, what the Osun people were going to get if your party had won, were overshadowed by these allegations and counter-allegations, which your party was also not exonerated from.
You mean allegations about threats of violence and so on and so forth?
Yes.
Yeah. No, well, if you were there on the ground, you probably wouldn't say that. The outside world probably focused on that. And of course, the APC leaders themselves, particularly from outside Osun State, would focus on that. As far as we're concerned, on the PDP side, we didn't focus on that. We got on with the job, and we raised issues during the course of the election, issues that ought to have been raised, issues about the fact that Osun State, for example, is owing 483 billion naira over the last 4 years, has borrowed that money, is now owing that. Issues about, whether or not contracts were actually completed, whether anything had been commissioned in the state in the last 4 years in terms of contracts and so on and so forth, buildings and roads and so on and so forth. These are the fundamental issues touching and concerning the lives of the people of Osun State. And these issues were well canvassed, well argued, by both candidates, I might add, Yola Omishore and Rauf Aregbesola, and their supporters and those behind them. And these were the issues that were important to us. Now, some people may want to talk about the fact that, let me put it to you like this. If APC had lost the election, if APC had lost the election, I'm sure that they would have said this was not a free and fair election because there was police presence there. But they won the election. Why don't they say the same now? Why are they saying it's free and fair?
No, but I think some of them are saying that there was that over militarization.
You can't have it both ways. I mean, the fact remains that they won the election. Fine, all well and good. Some of us concede that. I concede that. Now, if they had lost that election, I put it to you, that they would have said that this was not a free and fair election. Look, you can't have it both ways.
But remember, they complained about arrests of their members. In fact, I think yesterday, if I remember properly, we had a guest who said one of them was arrested, and it was until after accreditation, so the chap could not vote.
Okay. Well, that is a very serious allegation, and if it is true, it needs to be looked into. Nobody is in the business of defending the indefensible, and nobody has the right to deprive a fellow Nigerian of his right to vote. I would never support such a thing. But the question then has to be put, why did it happen if it happened? How many people did it happen to? Was it an isolated event? Did they find something that caused arms or whatever? I mean, it depends on the case, but I certainly wouldn't support such a thing. But what I'm saying is that there are always errors here and there. Anything that has human beings involved, there are always issues here and there. But by and large, as far as I'm concerned, it wasn't over-militarized. Look, you can dramatize this as much as you like. You can come out with the propaganda, and the APC is very good at it. I mean, like, they're the best, when it comes to such things. And come out and say, well, we won the election, but it was militarized, and, we were intimidated, our people were threatened, and the securities were working for the other side, and yet we still won, and so on and so forth. But as far as I'm concerned, that is an inappropriate approach to the whole thing. They won the election, or we believe they won the election, all well and good, but this was an expression of the will of the people of Osun State. It was a close election. It was an election that was fought very hard by both sides, a credible campaign on both sides, and the numbers are very, very close. And we believe strongly that if we continue like this and there's peace in our state, by the time we have another governorship election in the state, we will certainly beat the APC, whoever they field at that time.
So if you think your party lost fair and square, I mean, if your candidate goes to court, would they have a chance?
Well, that depends on the evidence that's adduced. Like I said, I haven't had the opportunity to sit with Yola Omishore yet, or the party leadership of the state. We just came back. I left Osun on Sunday. I'd be interested to know, and I'll certainly find out. But, they're in a better position to know than me because they've sat down and they've discussed all these things and they've exchanged notes. Now, if there are issues that can be raised in court to show clearly and categorically that this was not a fair election, I think it's the right and proper thing for him to do is to go to court and explore. In any case, it's good to exercise your civil rights and your civic duties. If you feel wrong, you go to court. That's the way to do it. Not to ask your supporters to march in streets. Let me give you an example of what could have happened. The minute the election results were confirmed by INEC, I went to Osun when I came back to Ile-Ife, and honestly, the town was charged. I mean, just one word from our leaders, from those of us that were leading on the PDP side in the town, the place would have erupted because people were in the streets, particularly around Omishore's house, and they were saying, oh, they wouldn't accept, and it took an appeal by the PDP leaders in the state to all these young men and women to say, look, calm down. It's just an election. It's not a war. The results are out. We'll look at it. And if we feel that anything has gone wrong, we will go to court. That's the way forward. So I do not begrudge the PDP at state level or Omishore for going to court at all. And I wish him well. Like I said, Aregbesola exercised that right from 2007. And he ended up winning 3.5 years later. Let's wait and see what happens.
Should this be the way elections should be conducted? I mean, 2015 is around the corner. Yeah. The security present and all of that. Is that what we're going to expect?
I would rather have, like I said earlier, strong security on the ground. Let me put it like that.
But do we have enough personnel to do that?
That would be a question best put to the president and to the commander-in-chief. I sincerely hope that he does, because what we need to do is to ensure a free and fair election. I would rather have that than a return to the old days of killing, maiming, castration, intimidation, and so on and so forth. Whatever it takes for us to ensure that the Nigerian people are allowed to express their views and their, cast their votes freely and fairly. I think that's what we need to do. And I think the government has done very well in that respect.
Your man Digbita says, you said you were privy to some security reports. He says to ask you what position you hold now about it.
About what?
The security report you said you were privy to, I guess.
What position I hold about the security reports? I've already expressed that here. What I said was that it was based on the question that was put to me about Obanikoro's assertions during a press conference. And I was saying that I shared his views and I shared his concerns simply because I happened to be privy to some of the reports and so on and so forth that he had communicated to me. And not just him, a lot of our party leaders were quite privy to some of these things. Even the APC leaders at the state level, particularly the governor, some of the people around him were also, because they were informed. And, a lot of work was going on behind the scenes to ensure that we had a good election and a credible election and nobody was hurt. And like I said, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. There may have been a few arrests here and there for whatever reasons. That's for the security agencies to explain. But by and large, this was a good election. We should commend the government. We should commend INEC. I also said that earlier. We should commend the government. We should commend the security agencies. And most important of all, we should commend...
and INEC did pretty well in this election.
In my view, subject to whatever... we may produce in court, but as far as I'm aware, they did very, very well.
Obafemi Adeniran says before the results was announced, you posted on your Facebook page that PDP was winning, even while they were losing.
No, you see, this is the problem with some of these people. They get on Twitter, they get on Facebook, they don't. That I didn't post it on my Facebook page. I made a clear and categorical statement to Premium Times, which is a website magazine which is highly respected. And what I did was that Sahara reporters had come out with all the results by that time. This was the night before the official announcement. Now, at that point in time, we had our own situation room in Ile-Ife at Omishore's campaign headquarters. We had our own people working. At that time, when the APC had declared to the whole world that they had won, at that time, they had only counted 880 polling booths throughout the state. Only 880. And as at that time, I think it was around 10 p.m. Or 8 p.m. the night before, we were ahead by 4,000 votes because we were counting ourselves. And I verified this. And I asked them, look, are you sure? I was with the candidate that evening. And Premium Times called me and I said, look, as far as we're concerned, at this point in time, we are ahead. Now, anything could have happened after that. And in any case, I think it was inappropriate for anybody to be saying they have won an election before INEC came out with their numbers, which was the following morning, I think at 6 a.m. or so on and so forth. And many of us felt that it was wrong. You see, let me tell you the danger with this. A lot of people don't quite understand the implications of it. If, for example, they continue to count, say 10 o'clock the night before, APC had told the whole world and all their supporters in the state that they had won the election, as they did. If by the following morning things had changed and INEC came out with different numbers and different figures, and then said PDP won, you know what would have happened? The whole state would have gone up in flames. And some of us felt that they were preparing the ground for such a thing simply because they felt that there was still a possibility they may lose, and then they'll say the whole thing was rigged and over-militarized and so on and so forth. And we need to be sensitive. So I think it was appropriate and important for us to point out the fact that you shouldn't be saying so-and-so won at any point in time until INEC comes up with the figures. Do you
think that should be directed at media houses? Or you think it was the handiwork of the APC?
No. I think it should be directed. I think it should be directed. Well, first of all, the APC, the ones that collated, they were the ones that were coming up with these figures. I don't blame the media houses for airing, but I think there ought to be a certain level of responsibility about this. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's important that we should always wait for INEC. We can all say we are winning, but to say we have won and to tell the whole world we've won 20 local government areas, the night before, even if you feel you have done so, even if you feel that that is likely to be the case, I think it's a little bit dangerous, simply because if you're not right or you've got your numbers wrong and something else happens the following morning, the whole state will just go up in flames.
All right. I have to thank you for coming on. We've been speaking with Mr. Femi Fani Kayode, a member of the People's Democratic Party and the former Minister of Aviation, on the outcome of the Osun elections. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thanks.